In 10 days and 2 hours' time, the polls will have closed following Namibia's 2024 presidential and National Assembly elections. As the final preparations are underway for November 27, that will usher in a brand new president. Our mission on the Wheels of Justice this evening is to have regard to two possible scenarios: a run-off presidential election versus a rerun election. Tonight, we enlist the pro bono service of distinguished legal eagles to unpack these and other possibilities awaiting Namibia and her people beyond the imminent D-Day. A very good evening and a warm welcome, Namibia. My name is Daniel Nadunya. We'll be back in a jiffy to kickstart with the much anticipated proceedings. Welcome back, and the Wheels of Justice is officially in motion. And joining us tonight is Mr. Ferdinand Mukwata, a legal practitioner, as well as a member of the Namibian Bar, Advocate Werner Busak. Thank you so much, Leonard Friends, for making time for the Wheels of Justice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, we shall not endeavor to establish who of you preferred a presidential or a presidential candidate. Is that a secret, or
we'll just go with the flow?
Is there some? Okay, right. Perhaps let's get going. Remind us, please, Mr. Mukwata, how candidates vying for the presidential seat are nominated.
Okay, basically you can get nominated in two ways. The first is by a registered political party nominating a person as the presidential candidate, submitting that nominee to the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, who vets and confirms in terms of the provisions of the Electoral Act. Or a person, an independent candidate, with the support of 500 people per region, can also be nominated to be a presidential candidate and goes through the same process of verifying through the Electoral Commission. Those are the two ways in which a person can be nominated to be a presidential candidate.
Right. And Advocate, perhaps in pursuit of the first citizen to be elected on Wednesday, the 27th of November, 2024. What, in any case, is this constitutional body called head of state and government, also known as the president, in terms of our constitution, Article 27, to be specific?
Well, as you say, Article 27 clearly stipulates the president and the vice president. President appoints the vice president. But firstly, let me be clear. I mean, we know the president is elected by virtue of the principle universal suffrage, one person, one vote. So therefore, you know, Article 27 provides that you have the presidency, and the president will appoint a vice president, and he will have ministers and special advisors in the presidency who effectively make up the presidency. And similarly, then obviously there will be a cabinet that is appointed by the president. And the president holds executive powers, and in consultation with his cabinet, he will make whatever decisions necessary for the country.
Now, the same article that is, or let's rather move to Article 28, which states that the election of the president shall be done in accordance with the principles of and procedures to be determined by Act of Parliament. Perhaps walk us through this statutory principle and procedures, Mr. Mukwata.
Yes, I think first of all, we need to understand that the Constitution is basically a high-level, the high-level law of the country. It will not have the specific details of how certain things happen. So Article 28 talks about the election of the president, and then it says it will be done through an Act of Parliament. That Act of Parliament is the Electoral Act of 2014. And it stipulates the nomination that I spoke to earlier, it's part of that act, how you are nominated and how you get to be confirmed as a presidential candidate. And after that, obviously, we go back to Article 28.1, which says you are directly elected through universal suffrage, meaning that people will directly vote for the nominated candidate. So the electoral body, which is the ECN, then facilitates the elections, which we are looking at in 10 days' time, basically.
Now, a critical provision arises in that case, advocate, and when it clearly says no person shall be elected as president unless he or she attains more than 50% of the votes.
Yes.
That can be 50 plus 1 or whatsoever
Yes.
it may be. Now, it continues and say, if that is not attained, if that 50 plus 1% is not attained, the necessary number of ballots shall be conducted until such results is reached. Perhaps, what does this mean in layperson's language?
Okay, I think you must be clear. The provision provides for more than 50%.
Yes.
But if you don't reach that margin, then the two highest candidates will take part in a rerun effectively.
That is where the rerun
Yes,
comes.
that is where the rerun comes. So the two highest candidates from the earlier election process will then take place in the rerun, and then the one with the majority votes, with 50 plus whatever percentage, will obviously be the successful candidate. So that is really what it means. So we need to have a winner who obtains 50 plus in the elections to become president.
So that is irrespective of the numbers attained by different candidates. If, say, one gets 27 and the other one gets 20 or 30, maybe 8, the other one 27, the other one maybe 49, it thus means the one with 29 or 28 goes with takes on a rerun with the one with 50 or 49.
Well, the two highest candidates who do not succeed in getting 50 plus in the votes. So whichever ones are the two highest ones will have to participate in a rerun then.
Right.
That's what it means.
That's very... Mr. Mukwata, you want to...
Yes. Yes, just to, as you indicated earlier,
yes,
that there are two critical things that we are facing.
Yes.
We are talking about today. It's the rerun and the runoff.
Yes.
Yes.
So a runoff is basically what we are talking about.
Yes.
A rerun is something else.
Oh, yeah,
but the principle is the same as my senior said. If, and you can imagine we have 15 presidential candidates this year.
Yes.
And if it's possible that none of them gets more than 50 votes, then the two highest, even if the highest...
50% of votes, so that we are just clear.
Of the total votes, 50% of the total votes.
Yes.
If none of them gets that, then it means the two highest one, whether the first one is 49 or 49 point something,
yes,
and the other one is 5%. Those are the two highest. So they will have to do a runoff, which is then a second ballot then to contest. And still then, the one who gets the most votes from those two will emerge as the victorious
What
candidate.
happens if more than one or more than two candidates gets the same number of percentage?
Well, that is a...
Let's take three candidates.
Yes.
One gets 49%, but the two
gets the same
gets 25 each.
Well, technically, it seems that they will have to participate, all three of them.
All three of them.
Yes.
will
Even though the Constitution seems to say the two highest. Now, you don't seem to have a two highest in real terms, isn't it?
Right.
You have one with a higher margin and then two with the same margin.
Yes.
So they would effectively become the two highest.
Yes,
I would still participate.
I don't foresee
Yeah.
A tie.
eliminating the one
Yes,
of them. I do not see any ground, but it would be justified to have both of them contesting with the highest candidate than to eliminate one of them.
Right.
It wouldn't make sense.
Yes.
So in any case, does the Constitution make any provision as to how many reruns can take place?
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't. It doesn't, and I don't think...
So you can go for the second round and even the third round?
Yes.
Like you said,
Yes.
until a winner, because what this majority system basically entails is that there must be a clear winner. Clear winner from the votes, from the total votes. If for any reason there's no clear winner, you have to conduct the ballot until a clear winner emerges. And that's one who gets. Well, in a rerun, it seems if you just get more than the others.
It does not need to be 50 plus 1?
You know, I actually looked at that, but you need to step back and read the provision again. It clearly says you will not become president unless
you have more than 50.
More than 50 plus 1.
Yes.
Although the later part of that provision does not seem to say that.
If the third round, if the third round where the two face each other and each has 50-50, it means you'd still have to go for a rerun.
You need to get 50 plus.
It still remains the threshold.
Yes.
I agree.
Very interesting indeed. But let's look at the difference between a rerun and a runoff.
He's
Well,
just explained it.
Well, a runoff is what we're just talking about, where there's no clear winner.
Yes.
A rerun is basically when, for whatever reason, the whole election is annulled.
Right.
It's declared, it's nullified, it's declared null and void or of no effect, like we didn't have elections.
Yes, perhaps let's
And
go
then-
further.
yes.
What would necessitate an annulment?
Well, from the cases that we have seen in the region,
Yes.
is basically when there's proven fraud, irregularities during the election process, or some other malicious conduct that contaminates the election. That it's no. Remember, we are supposed to have free and fair elections. That is the test. If the election is not free and fair, and there's some untoward practice that can be proved, obviously we are talking about a court challenge here, and then some evidence is given, and then the court says, look, there's enough evidence to show that there was irregularities during the election process. Then the court would order that the election that was just held is of no effect, and then you would have a rerun, which is basically having a fresh election. So the difference is that a rerun is really a fresh election, while a runoff is basically a contestant, two contestants now just contesting in a second ballot, the whole election still being valid, and just to see who emerges as a winner.
Now, can a rerun be in respect of both the National Assembly and presidential election?
Yes. It can be in respect of, remember now, there's no difference between the National Assembly elections and the presidential elections. It is an open national ballot that every citizen participates in. So if there are issues pertaining to either of the elections, one or both of them, and any party challenges that and successfully challenges that in a court of law, and the court announces that election, whether it's the presidential election or the national parliamentary elections, then they can be rerun in respect of both or any of them.
No. Thank you so much. You're watching The Wheels of Justice. Upon our return, we'll open up our telephone lines for your respectful and relevant questions and comments. Do not move an inch. We'll be back. We'd like to hear from you, including but not limited to our usual suspects. For example, anytime from Tsumeb in the Oshkoto region, or Mr. Nicholas Dawson from Gibeon in the Hardap region. Our number here in Studio 4 rather is 061-291-3417. That is 061-291-3417. Dial away and shoot from the hip, as you always do. Prank calls are not particularly welcome this evening. Let's continue this conversation. It would also then be prudent, advocate, to, at this juncture, to juxtapose this majority system versus a first past the post system. What is the primary difference, and what are the legal merits and demerits of each of these systems?
All right. I mean, first past the post. I mean, as the name says, it's in reference to horse racing. You know, imagine people betting on horses. So the first horse passing the line or the post, that's effectively what first past the post means. So it doesn't matter, like we just discussed now, where you have 3 candidates running in the presidential elections. The issue of 50 plus votes is not at play. It's the one who gets the most votes. So if you have one candidate scoring 45% and you have other 20% and so on, then obviously the one who has 40% who has most votes in comparison to the remainder, that candidate would be the successful winner. That's what first past the post really means. So it's irrespective of the margin of 50 plus and the likes.
Right.
And the other side of the coin, the majority vote, is a scenario that our Constitution poses, really, that it must be a clear majority. And a clear majority must be 50 plus. Now, the rationale behind that, I mean, obviously different countries have different systems in play. But the countries who chose the majority type of scenario similar to us is about legitimacy of the candidate. You know, that you have a majority of people really who elected a particular individual. I mean, you can have in different countries, I mean, in any country we know, you have different components of numbers of the population in different sections of the country.
Advocate, sorry, you just have to hold your thought there. Let's hear from Petrina from Ohangwena region. Good evening.
Hello.
Yes, good evening, ma'am.
Good morning. Good afternoon. Good evening.
Yes, good evening, ma'am. Your question or contribution?
Yeah, my question is, we are talking about the election that we are facing now, and at some point, if the presidential candidate did not reach the 51%, when is, might be like now, the last election, Miss Esther Munyangwi become the deputy deputy minister of health. When is that might be being considered?
Well, can you just repeat your question and with a little bit of clarity? Yes.
Might be what was the cause for Mr. Munyangwi to be a deputy minister for a SWAPO part, I think, or what was the cause? Is it because there was some person needed, or what was the...
Was Dr. Munyangwe not appointed by the late president, Hage Geingob?
Okay, but it was not because they did not reach the 51%.
No, I do not know whether that is right to say, but let's hear from Mr. Mukwata.
Okay.
Well, I think advocates spoke about the powers of the president when you asked the question of what the presidency entails.
Yes.
The president basically appoints his cabinet and can appoint anyone to become part of that, Minister of Health, Minister of what. It has nothing to do with the 50 plus that we are talking about. It's basically the president, duly elected, exercising his prerogatives in terms of the Constitution.
I don't know whether I will be right to say the question stems from a misunderstanding or misconception of what the Constitution provides in terms of 50 plus 1 or more than 50% in terms of presidential contestation,
Yes.
and not necessarily parliamentary. I think we just need to make it different or to make it clear that the Constitution does not provide the same provision for members of parliament, perhaps.
Yes.
And this has also nothing to do with members of cabinet who are appointed by the president.
Yes.
Advocate, if you can just provide some clarity.
No, definitely. I mean, as we've spoken quite a bit now about the election of the president, so that provision is quite clear. It just deals with the 50 plus 1 scenario with the presidency, the election of a president for the country. Whereas parliamentary elections is a different scenario. I mean, each party contests, irrespective of, remember now, we seem to have a scenario playing out in our country today where most of the opposition parties, most of the political parties, let me not say opposition, most of the political parties who are contesting these elections have also put up a presidential candidate who happens to be their own party president. That's the scenario we have. We know we have 15 presidential candidates vying for presidential office at the moment. And those 15 are all coming from the different political parties, and those people happen to be party presidents. Now, apart from that, those political parties are clearly also contesting these elections, and we know we have, 96 seats in parliament? And from those seats, and we know each party has provided the Electoral Commission with, say, 96 names to say, well, these are our candidates. If we succeed in winning all the seats in parliament, then these are the people, 96 people who will occupy those seats on behalf of our party. This is what each party had to do and present a list to the Electoral Commission. So we know whatever percentage a party wins, those percentages are allocated in terms of the seats in parliament. So for argument's sake, if one party wins 50% of the seats in parliament or in elections as a political party, then 50% of the seats in parliament will be allocated to that particular party. And that's what happens. So it's a different scenario than the presidential 50 plus 1 issue.
Yes.
Well, I think we can take it further than that.
Yes.
We need to divorce that. And also, we look at the powers that the president exercises after being elected. What we are dealing with is really the process before.
Yes.
Before you are even pronounced to be the president.
Right. Mr. Mukwata, let's hear from Lucas from Windhoek. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd like to contribute.
Right.
In case if someone, a candidate, a presidential candidate, does not get the 50 plus 1, the rerun, when exactly is that going to take place? Is there a time frame as to when the rerun will take place, or is there a body that will still determine the time frame of the rerun?
That would rather be a run-off and not a rerun.
A rerun, sorry, a rerun.
It will be a run-off.
It will be a run-off.
Yes.
Okay, we needed to have that clarity as well. I missed out on that one.
Right.
So, but in case there is a rerun, when will that take place? Will it be immediately after the announcement of the results, or will will there still be a time frame to be announced from the authorities from the ECN side?
Right. Thank you so much, sir.
My pleasure.
Is there...
I don't think, I haven't come across provision that speaks to the time period, either for the runoff or the rerun. But obviously this would have to be treated as an agent with the, with the agency it deserves. If no one gets 50 plus and we need to do error, it has to be immediate.
Whose call will that be?
The ball will have to go back to the Electoral Commission,
right,
to conduct the ballot again. And if it's a rerun, the court will have to direct and say this should take place within how many days. For example, in the Malawi case, the Constitutional Court said it must take place within 150 days. So, but I think the agency is what must be emphasized, to say within that period within that electoral fever, let me say, you should conduct the rerun or the runoff.
Right. Maybe let's look at the case of Malawi. Let's maybe put it in context. What were the circumstances in that case?
Well, from what the courts said, it was basically, the court said there were major irregularities during the electoral process.
An aggrieved party took to court.
Two aggrieved parties from the opposition.
Yes.
Took the winner of that election, and we must also say they were using the first
past the post.
Yes, that one.
Right.
And the margins were so close.
Close, yes.
The one who got lesser and another candidate from the opposition basically took the winner to court and alleged that there were irregularities and all these things that basically go against fair and free elections. And they proved those allegations, or they upon the test of proving that was said by the court. And the court basically said, look, if this is the case as we have found, then the elections that you just held are nullified. They have no effect. And ordered that the country, everybody, goes back to their ballot box and vote again.
Yes.
And then the opposition basically emerged victorious in that election, right, in the rerun.
Thank you so much. Leonard Friends, can you allow me to accommodate one more caller?
Yes.
Mr. Jeffrey from Windhoek, good evening.
Good evening. How are you and the team?
We are well, thank you. Your contribution or question briefly, sir.
Yes, my first contribution actually is just to give a clarity to the caller that called on the Honorable Munyangwe on her appointments as member of the cabinet, though the advocate went on. Right. But I wanted just to give that special, the exact power where it comes from under the composition Article 46B, where the president has the power to appoint the 8 people. These are, I think it's on the basis of the special expertise that he sees or she sees to balance the cabinet. On that basis, that's how she was appointed, despite not being a member of the party, the governing party. That's how, so it's expertise, skills, status, and experience that the cabinet, the president, or they may see fit or lacking in the House.
Right.
So on that basis, that's how she became part of the cabinet. The
right.
other one is just a request. From what we have seen from other countries, all those that have outran the governing, there was no rerun. There was political maturity and tolerance to accept the results of the electorate. So that's my plea to the nation, to the Namibian nation, that whatever happens, they should be able to accept, not rushing for rerun all those issues without evidence. But we should also see what other countries have set the standard for. That's my contribution.
Thank you, sir. With regard to your last contribution, that is indeed possible with a rerun, but perhaps not possible with a runoff because that is a constitutional provision, isn't it, Advocate?
Yes,
It is.
Remember, a runoff is the presidential runoff between presidential candidates, whereas a rerun would be a holding of fresh elections, as my colleague had said.
Yes.
But that will be determined by virtue of a challenge in court, and the court will decide if there needs to be a rerun.
Perhaps, and when Mr. Mukwata, you were explaining about the provision in respect of majority and so on, I wanted to know, under what circumstances would perhaps circumvention of the majority principle or proviso, if permissible, can be considered, if at all permissible?
No, the Constitution does not give us options to say you could use this method. It stipulates that no president will be elected if they do not obtain more than 50% of the valid votes cast. That's the only option that we have. So you cannot circumvent it, and it will be that as long as the Constitution continues to provide as such.
All right. I hear sentiments from members of the public trying to compare the two systems, especially the South African system versus our system. That is in respect of the government of national unity versus what would be coalition government or minority government. Can we just perhaps explain these principles and how and under what circumstances are these considered? Yes.
All right. Look, for any government, most governments, let me just give you the general principle. It's accepted that for a party to be the ruling party, you must obviously obtain the majority of the votes in a national election, which comes to the issue of, similar to the presidential issue, we have 50 plus. So if you obtain more than 50%, you are clearly unequivocally the majority party.
Yeah,
and you can form a government.
In terms of Namibia, Advocate, we talk about two-thirds majority.
Yeah, well, two-thirds takes you to 60-something, nearly 70% of the vote.
Right.
That's what two-thirds mean.
Yes.
Right. But remember, two-thirds is a different story. I mean, two-thirds gives you a lot more power. It's about having the right to change the Constitution and all those things. But forming a government, having the right and the power to form a government, having the mandate from the electorate, depends on the percentage that you get, isn't it? So if you clearly have more than 50%, then you have the mandate to govern, and you don't need to govern with any other party. But if you obtain less than 50%, there is a choice in a lot of jurisdictions. You can form what they call a minority government. So if you between the margins of 40% to 50%, you can form a minority government. But what does a minority government mean? The problem is you still need the support of other parties in parliament in order to pass crucial legislation. Because with 40% or something like that, you don't have the majority. You don't have more than 50% in order to pass critical legislation or whatever legislation. So that is the problem with a minority government. Now in South Africa, the ANC could have formed a minority government, but that wouldn't have taken them far. And they knew they needed to get other parties on board in order to give them 50 plus, or even with the coalition government that they have now, or government of national unity, they have about nearly 70% with their partners in the GNU. So if they are in agreement with their partners, then they're likely to pass most legislation that is tabled in Parliament. And that's the critical issue.
But the South African system is quite different, distinct from that of Namibia. Is a government of national unity at all possible in Namibia, under any circumstance, given that the president is elected in a way that we explained
Yes.
by means of universal suffrage, and has the power then to appoint his cabinet or from whatever political party or from his political party or even outside a political arena.
Yes. I think we need to distinguish between the powers of government. We have the three branches, the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary.
Yes.
Presidential power is executive. So your cabinet basically performs executive power. They do not pass law.
Yes.
So you don't need votes there. You don't need majority there. But legislation, the National Assembly, the National Council, where members of political parties of those lists actually get to go to the National Assembly to be specific. This is the body that is tasked to perform the function of passing laws. This is where it becomes crucial. This is where we can ask the question whether a government of national unity can be an option or not. Because if there's no party that gets a 2/3 majority or even 50, there's no clear one, there's no clear majority that can outright vote a bill to become law, then they will need to get into some form of coalition with other parties in order to effectively run the business of the National Assembly.
Yes.
Otherwise, they will not be able to do that. Because remember, these are political parties with different ideologies and all that. Any bill that comes before them would have to be voted into law before it goes to the other steps.
Yes.
And that's where so the option really becomes, I think it can always be an option.
It can always be an option.
When we look at it from the legislative function of the government. And this is not something that is regulated in any law. You can form any kind of coalition or
coalition
or whatever you call it, depending on the circumstances of the results. When the results come out, it will really dictate what is possible for you to be able to effectively perform the function.
Right. Leonard, friends, thank you so much. There is a lot we can talk about, especially on this topic, but time again has no respect for anybody. So let's perhaps quickly look at the jargon of the day, and then we see it through to our conclusion. We will now take a look at the jargon of the day. Welcome back, and let's look at these two terms, annulment and challenged ballot. Perhaps let's start with annulment. Advocate.
Okay. Well, annulment is just a fancy word for cancelling. You know, cancelling an election, if you say you're annulling an election, it means you're cancelling it. That's as simple as that.
As if it did not happen,
Yes.
and the effect of whatever ballot
Yes.
is then now.
It's annulled, it's cancelled.
Thank you. Let's move on to challenged ballot. Mr. Mkwata.
Yes, challenge ballot from the U.S. jurisdiction where it happens, or it has happened, is basically where you are challenging the eligibility of a voter. We are saying this voter it was not eligible to cast his or her vote, and therefore we are challenging that vote of that particular person. So an example would be somebody who appears to have voted twice, or is not a registered voter, or is not a Namibian national, and all those instances. Anybody who picks that up can actually say, I have a doubt with this, I challenge the vote of this particular person because I've seen him voting at another polling station, and now he's appearing with the thumb is no longer there, or something like that. So that's basically a challenge ballot.
Right. Leonard, friends, thank you so much for making time for the Wheels of Justice, but let me give you 30 seconds each just for your final submission. Let's start with you, Advocate.
Oh, well, I don't know what to say. Look, I mean, these are exciting times. As a citizen, obviously, we all encourage citizens to go vote. It's very encouraging times. I mean, you have an exciting presidential election. You have 15 candidates. We don't know what will happen. Who knows, you know? And the difference between us and South Africa, you remember in South Africa, the president is voted by parliament. They don't have a system like us where we get to elect the president directly. So our people have a lot of power in their hands.
Advocate,
they can vote.
With that much said, I doubt whether you really did not know what to say. Mr. Mukwata, please.
Yes, it's 30 seconds is not enough, but all I want to say is that we have a peculiar scenario on our hands because we have 15 presidential parties, 21 presidential candidates, 21 political parties, all vying to get votes from a voting population of 1.4 million, basically. Very small population and a lot of options. So we really need to exercise apply our minds as we are going to the polls. And I think the contestants themselves also need to apply their minds as we are going to the polls as to what is the effect of these two issues that I just said.
Gentlemen, thank you so much again for making time for the wheels of justice and for your pro bono service to members of our public.
Always
and with
welcome.
that, we've come to the end of tonight's proceedings. I'm Daniel Nadunya, declaring this session adjourned.